Welcome back to another episode of the Theater Professor vidcast. I'm back again, and we have our lovely lady here that we did in our previous vidcast. If you're coming to this vidcast before watching the previous one, I suggest watching the previous one to kind of see how we got to our current state. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be playing with a little bit of the coloration and what you can do to start coloring this character in. Remember, we're working on a costume design here. So we have Jane. I named her in the last one. She's such a lovely lady. I mean, her hair is so flowy, and she's got a nice skirt. Probably a businesswoman somewhere. Who knows? So let's do a little bit of coloring. The first thing we're going to start off with is we're always going to make a new layer here. So I'm going to add a layer, and I'm actually going to put it over top of the shading for right now, and you'll see why here in just a few minutes. And I'm going to rename it. We'll just rename it First Color. You can rename things whatever you want. You know, if you wanted to call this chicken pot pie, I mean, that works. So there we go with First Color. Done. We'll exit out of that. And we'll grab a color. We're going to start with our skirt. We're going to make it a nice, how about a nice red? We all like red. Something, let's try that. And I'm going to pick a brush. Obviously, I'm not going to be doing it with my pencil brushes. I'm going to use, let's play with the paint brushes. This is what comes with it, so you don't have to go searching for it. And we'll start with the round brush. And like always, make sure that your size is where you want it. And you can leave opacity wherever it is. I mean, you can adjust as you go. So we're going to zoom in. I'm going to start painting the skirt area. Now remember, the brush uses a glaze type setting, which means we're glazing over top of what is already there. Notice how I'm not worried about going out of the lines right now. I'm just laying down a nice glazy color over top of it. Oops, screwed up a little there, but that's fine. We can go in and adjust that here in a second. So let's see. Yep. Okay. So I've switched over to my my smudge tool, and I'm smudging in that red a little bit. Now this is what happens with the glaze if you end up going over an area twice, is that it builds up layers. Again, it's very much like watercolor. And, you know, for me, that's a happy accident. You can see here I kind of play with it. You notice I will lay down a couple of things and then come back in and smudge, because it gives us texture. Because as we know, fabric has texture. Fabric is not flat and boring. Again, understand that I'm just kind of going outside the lines. It doesn't really matter. And for those that are curious, my smudge tool currently is the oil pastel one. You can do whatever you want. Then I'll come in here. This is a shadow area. I like to build up my shadow areas with multiple layers. That goes back to my watercoloring. That's how I tend to do it when I'm watercoloring as well, as I build it up with multiple layers. Maybe a little paint here in the corner. There we go. And then, oops, then up top here, let's give her, there's going to be more shadow built up in this area. I'm going to smudge it. We're gonna do some erasing here in a little bit. And one of the things, remember I talked about how I did my shading and I said that we'd be using it. Notice I'm using it in a couple different ways. One, where I put the shading in the charcoal, I'm tending to go over that area more, and it also just darkens. When you're using something with a glaze, it just darkens it as well. So let's zoom out a little bit. Oh, look at her. And then the reason I'm not worried about going out of the lines is that I can come in here and I can erase. Look at that. Erase along this side. My eraser tool currently is hard brush. Come up here and we can erase along her belt. And being able to zoom in and rotate it is so nice. I'm going to come in and erase, oops, let's undo that and create a little smaller eraser tool. There we go. Now, technically speaking, I don't need to do this because I'm going to be painting over it. But again, because I tend to use the glaze brushes, I tend to need to erase the underlayer, because otherwise when I put color over top of it, it'll just create a mix mash of color. There we go. So you can see how nice that comes out, right? And then what did that take me? All of, I don't know, I don't have a timer up. All of like 5 minutes, okay? So we're going to do that with the shirt as well. We're going to, let's see. Let's go with a green. We'll make her Christmassy, but like a dark, there we go. Something like that right there. And we will stick with our current brush, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some other brushes here in a little bit. See, the great thing about being able to do this in layers is I can do this a couple different ways and then be able to do it in different colors, use different styles, different techniques, and all of that's really, really handy. Let's come over here and start laying up her arm here. Again, don't worry about going out of bounds, out of lines, you know, because the eraser tool makes that really useful. Let's start laying in some of her darker areas. You can see where the shadow is there, and so I'll build up a little bit. And you notice I tend to use fairly big strokes because I know when I come in with my smudge tool, I'm going to lose a bunch of it from smudging. So I don't worry about about putting too much there. So then I come in with my smudge tool and start to smudge away what I don't want. There we go. Look at that. Again, just kind of. And if you lift up on your finger or your stylus as you go, it'll remove a little bit of your color, which allows you to smudge it to a lighter effect. You notice here, I'm essentially smudging it down because I had it coming up too high. Now, I'm doing this on the same layer as the skirt. You don't have to. This could be 2 separate layers. I'm doing it on the same layer because they don't overlap. If they were to overlap, I would be doing it on a different layer because it's much harder to erase or smudge along overlapped areas. Where here I can... There we go. Now she's starting to come to. Jump to my eraser. Start erasing along sections. So when I move over to the belt here in a second, I am going to add another layer because I don't want the belt to collide with the other two. I want to be able to erase it fairly easily and cleanly. And there, along that area. While I'm doing this, I'll just tell you little stories. So the weather's beautiful out today. My daughter, for those of you that don't know, I have a daughter and a son. My daughter, though it was sprinkling earlier, and she's a big fan of puddle jumping, which I'll take credit for because I think jumping in puddles is a lot of fun after a rain. And so we were outside at the college that I teach at because I had to run a couple errands, and she sees this puddle, and literally it maybe had, a couple drops of water within it. And she runs over there and she's like, "Look, Daddy, puddle." And she jumps right in it and nothing happens. And then she looks at me, she goes, "Daddy, puddle." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, sweetie, but you need a little more water to make a splash." She's adorable. See, and you can start to see how this is really starting to take shape. Oops. Always. Another thing, the ability to undo. Switch over to my smudge tool. There we go. This was coming out a little too much for my taste. So if I bring it back a little bit, bring this up this way. Now, again, these are just the tools that I'm using for this one. Procreate has so many different tools. You can create different styles and different looks. So don't hesitate to play around and create new and kooky things, because it's a lot of fun. Or at least I think so. Need a little erasure. Oh, you know what? I should probably paint her collar. Need to reduce the size a little bit. There we go. And then back here. And in here. Now, the one thing I will tell you is I will be doing her skin on a completely different layer. It's just about 1 billion times easier. Okay, we're good. I'm going to do a couple of those and then blend that. That's like the shadow under her collar. There we go. All right. Now let's add another layer. And let's go ahead and do some skin tones. And I don't think I have any. Oh, I do have some saved skin tones right now. So we'll use that color for the time being. Make sure we're on the right layer. We are. And actually, I'm going to take it underneath the clothing layer. If I can get it. There we go. We'll start layering in her skin. And again, I'm not really worried about. In fact, I could even bring that up and do something like that, because it paints quicker. Because coming back in and erasing is so easy. Again, she's barefoot. She's probably at home now, you know, enjoying the weather, just like I am. She has a huge, huge neck. That's important for some reason. Let's go ahead in here and erase. I know some of this is not really exciting, but my hope is that you're either following along, listening to my mundane storytelling, or having a beer, unless you're under of age. Then if you're having a beer, just don't tell me. I'm okay with that. There we go. See her hand there? We'll do the same thing over on this side. Just a little smaller. There we go. I love the ability to erase. Now notice here, this is really interesting. So notice I'm erasing. It looks like I'm erasing the red, but I'm not. What's happening is it's layering on top of, the skin tone is layered on top of the red. There we go. Come down to her legs. I can bring this up a little bit. There we go. Look at that. It's just so pretty. Her and her bare feet with no toes. Crazy talk. Who doesn't have toes? She doesn't. And here's a good example. See where I put the shading in with the charcoal? It's adding the shading in as if I did it in a coloration of the skin tone, which is really, really helpful. So that's why I like to go in, like I did in the previous tutorial, and put in a bunch of shading, because it'll help lead what I'm doing with the skin tones. Again, up here. Not bad, not bad. And let's do her hair. Let's go, what was that? Let's go just with a nice light brown. That'll, do I like that? I like that better. Oops. And this is one of those areas, so I need to add a layer. That way I don't have to worry about then I'll come in and erase. And again, if you're doing this for a costume design, you might, and you want to print out a nice copy, you might take a little more time than what I'm taking. I'm moving really quick because what I would be doing here is I'd be considering this my my color sketches so that the other designers and directors can kind of see the direction that I'm going in. It's not so much about the final product right now as it is about, okay, this is kind of what we're trying to make her look like. And I'm going to come in and just add a little more. I like to add texture in hair. Oops, too big. Too big. Let's make it smaller. There we go. And then smush it around a little bit. You know, obviously, as you can see here, I'm going to need to do a little more erasing because I'm kind of adding a little more outside the lines, but that's fine. That's a great thing about this, is that you can erase and things go really quickly. Come in here and erase this. I erased too much that time. Oops. Let's try and be a little more careful. And I did it again. So I'm going to reduce that. I'm going to spin it around so I have a better sense of what. There we go. Look at that. Jane is really coming along. So now we have, you know, again, oh, I should do her belt, right? Right. And we'll do her belt on this hair layer. We'll just make it a dark gray belt. And there we go. Okay, so she has her belt, she has her shirt, she has her skirt, and so say you completely finish. So let's say I'm finished. One of the things that you'll want to do to save yourself layers is to combine layers, and one of the ways to do that is to grip the top and bottom layer in a series and pinch them together. So what you'll see here is I've got the first and last, and I pinch them together, and they create one layer. And what that does is it allows me to turn off that coloring. So if I wanted to, I could then come in, add another layer, and begin the process all over, which is really cool because it allows you to create a bunch of different types. I have, for example, where are you? One of the, see, I have a fabric one here. So let's make her skirt wool. And let's make it a dark gray. Let's see what happens. I don't know. Oops, too big. So we'll bring that down. So making her a nice wool skirt. And this is one of those paintbrushes that I managed to pick up from somebody who had them on the Procreate forums, and I thought it would be useful for what I do as a theater professor, and it really has. So we're creating a nice woolish textured skirt. And then I'm going to show you something else that's neat. I'm going pretty dark right now, kind of on purpose, because first off, this is not glazed. You notice we're covering up the underlayer pretty heavily right now. But what you can do is if you go into your layer, oops, wrong way. And wrong way. Oh, it's the end. That's right. You click on the end. You have all these settings very similar to what you have if you're using Photoshop. So you can multiply, you can linear burn, you can color burn. And you can see, you can kind of play with all of these. Hard light, let's go hard light. Okay, and then what I like to do as well is if you come into here, you can adjust the opacity of it So now we're creating a lighter gray skirt. So that's an opacity of 52%. If you really wanted to, you could do all sorts of these other things like, I don't know, I haven't played with any of these yet. So, oh, you can change the kind of the tint of it. Color balance. Again, these are things that I haven't really played with yet. I'm actually going to undo all that. I'm going to keep the opacity. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to get rid of the opacity too. Look at me changing my mind. I'm a crazy man. And there we go. So now what we can do is if you've got somebody looking at this, you can change between the two. You can be like, well, that's nice. Or what about this? This is kind of nice. And don't put them over top of each other. So you can start to use this as a designer rather than doing multiple renderings. You're doing a single rendering where you can change layers out. And if you really wanted to, you could then output this to Photoshop and print out each of them. Or if you wanted to present them, you could have Photoshop up and switch between layers in Photoshop. Well, that's all I'm going to cover today with the coloring. There's a ton more options that we can do. And as I continue this series, you'll see how it can be useful. One of the things that I haven't even brought up yet is being able to cut pieces of clothing off of pictures and incorporate them into your design. So if you know specifically that you want, a certain skirt and you found a picture of it, you can actually incorporate it into this very, very carefully. Again, my name is Terry Dana Jakimiak II. I'm the theater professor, and thanks for sticking around for another video on Procreate. Make sure you stay tuned, and if you haven't already, subscribed at thetheaterprofessor.com, and you'll be able to keep up to date with these vidcasts. Thank you, and have a wonderful day. Or if you're not going to have a wonderful day, have at least a mediocre day, and then think about it as wonderful. Bye.